Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. So I'd like to bring our meeting to order. And this evening we have a joint meeting with the Town of Groton Select Board and the Finance Committee and the Town of Dunstable Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Board. For everybody who's here, I think you might need to call your selective boards and committees to order.
I'll call the Groton Select Board to order, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dunstable Select Board is called to order.
Thank you. All right, does that cover everybody? We got a big group tonight, and unfortunately we don't have enough room, tables, or space to put them. So for comments, I'll ask everybody to come to the microphone to speak. I don't know if everybody has a select a spokesperson for their group. We're going to have a presentation, a joint presentation from the Town of Groton, the Groton Dunstable Regional School District, as well as the Town of Dunstable. And I believe Sherry, Mark, and Jason, who's up first? Mark?
Mark.
Okay, and we have the presentation up. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank you very much. This is the report of the Town Managers TRICOM Working Group, and so I'll just go through it very quickly. Fiscal year 24 budget development was particularly difficult. The town had a very, very difficult time putting the budget process together. Our budget process starts before the Groton Dunstable Regional School District and the Town of Dunstable's budget process starts. We were required to get our budget done by December 31st. So what ended up happening is I had to get an estimate from the school district far in advance of when you would ordinarily put your budget together. And based on that, the district provided an estimate in December of 22 that was very, very conservative, and it put the town of Groton's budget out of balance. Next slide, please. So due to a change of the governor of the Commonwealth, the budget from the state was also late. We usually get the first estimates from the governor by the end of January, but because of the new governor, they had an extra month, so that didn't come in until March 1st. The town of Dunstable started their process late. They were transitioning to a new town administrator. So a usually cohesive budget process was anything but when it came to developing the budget. So to avoid a repeat in fiscal year 25, the town proposed forming a working group that would start in the summer of 23 to put the budget together for next year. So we put together what we call the Town Managers TRICOM Working Group, which included representation from the Groton Select Board, the Groton Finance Committee, the Groton Dunstable Regional School District Committee, and of course the town and the schools administration. Serving on the committee was myself, the Assistant Finance Director from Groton, Patricia Dufresne, Dr. Chesson, Sherry Kersey, the Business Manager, Allison Manugian and Matt Pisani from the Groton Select Board, Bud Robertson and Mary Linsky from the Groton Finance Committee, Faye Rayner, Brian LeBlanc, and Rosanna Casavecchia from the District School Committee. My finance team also played a very important role in this, represented by our Treasurer Collector, Hannah Moeller, Megan Foster, our Principal Assessor, Don Dunbar, our Town Clerk, Melissa Doig, who's our Human Resources Director, and Kara Cruikshank, who's my Executive Assistant. So the first meeting took place on June 12, 2023. In order to provide a budget recommendation for fiscal year 25, the committee determined that the following steps and tasks had to happen. We wanted to review current spending, comparing it to comparable communities and school districts. We wanted to develop preliminary revenue projections for fiscal 25 through 29. We wanted to develop spending assumptions so we knew exactly what we were going to be spending. And we wanted to put together a 5-year financial plan that included the spending from the school district and the town of Groton. A specific set of criteria was established to determine what the comparable communities would be for the town of Groton. We looked at population, residential versus commercial, industrial percentage of property, average single-family home value, average single-family tax bills, single-family tax bills, a percentage of the value, and some information from the Department of Revenue relative to the comparable communities' per capita income. Based on this, there were 5 towns that we felt were comparable to Groton: Georgetown, Hamilton, Hanover, Norfolk, and Swampscott. And then we decided, what did we want to compare? And we have this list of criteria they have up on the board, including the total municipal expenditures, total educational expenditures, the percentage of municipal expenditures broken down by the categories that we set our budget at, the stabilization fund balance, local receipts, unrestricted local aid, and free cash as a percentage of the budget. You may ask, why did we use fiscal year 22? That's the most recent data that we can get from all the communities, because all those reports were filed with the state over the summer. The town accountants in the various towns don't usually submit the data from the previous fiscal year until September. I believe it's September, Patricia. So FY22 had the best information, and that's what we went with. So what we found from our comparable community studies, the Groton Stabilization Fund balance is average among those of our comparable communities. However, given rating agencies' focus on municipal reserve balances, we think we should increase our stabilization fund because we want to be able to maintain our AAA bond rating. Groton, for the most part, is average with the comparable communities when it comes to municipal expenditures. We had one exception for that in our Culture and Recreation Department. Our country club has been very successful the last couple of years, so we decided to remove that because not all of the comparable communities had a country club. But even after taking that out, we spend more money in culture and recreation than our comparable communities, and the reason for that is our library. The town has always been committed to spending a lot on the library. It's been in survey after survey, the community wanted us to see that, and that's exactly what we're doing. In addition to that, Groton has the largest percentage of local receipts to offset operating expenses. We also have the lowest percentage of unrestricted local aid to offset operating expenses, which is very similar to what happens with the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District. The state does not support local services in Groton to the extent that it does other communities. And our free cash balance as a percentage of operating budget since 2018 is in line with comparable communities. Based on the report, the working group concluded that municipal spending is in line with comparable communities. And we think that was really important to show that our spending is in line with our peer towns. The school district also conducted a study which was a lot more exhaustive than the one that we did on the town. They developed a report called Groton-Dunstable Regional School District by the Numbers. They looked at demographics, the budget, staffing and allocation of resources, special education, and academics. Very important. They had several communities that they looked at, but 4 specific communities were considered comparable to the school district because of enrollment, and that's Bedford, Linfield, North Reading, and Westwood. What we found with that is per pupil expenditures by the Groton-Dunstable Regional School District were below the median from 2012 through 2021. The level of budget growth was necessary just to meet and bring us up to the median level of expenditures with comparable districts. With regard to staffing, we're average among all the major categories, and that includes administration pay, principal pay, starting teacher salaries. The only area where we were a little bit above the salary areas and a little bit above the median was where we are with the number of teachers per 100 students, and the number in our top step teachers were slightly above the median as well. Groton-Dunstable expenditures are aligned with other comparable districts, falling in the median or lower with the exception of expenditures on benefits. Groton-Dunstable's identification of servicing with disabilities are aligned with other communities, and this to me is the most important finding that we came up with, and that's the academic performance is equal to or better than the comparable communities despite the fact that we spend less per pupil than the comparable communities, and that's a testament to the work of the school district. Similar to the municipal comparable study, the working group concluded that the district spending is in line with comparable communities. Again, another very, very important finding. The next step that we looked at was revenue projections. So the things that we looked at that make up our revenues are state aid, other available funds, local receipts, and the tax levy. With regards to state aid, next slide, please. As you can see here, we are not counting on major increases over the next 5 years in state aid, and I think Dunstable will probably see a similar thing. The state just does not support Groton to the extent that it should, in my opinion, and they certainly don't do that with the school district. So we're looking at very minimal increases over time with unrestricted local aid. Next slide. Other available funds makes up our capital stabilization fund, the stabilization fund for the school district in terms of their capital budget, our ambulance receipts, and free cash. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time right now on free cash. With regards to the municipal budget, we only use free cash in budgetary expenditures that are one-time, not recurring. So, for example, we pay bonuses to our department heads based on the previous year's performance, and it does not go to their base. So that money is taken from free cash because it's not recurring. It doesn't, raises aren't guaranteed each year. In addition to that, we pay some debt service out of it, and we also use it for, there's one other category here, and I'm drawing a blank. OPEB, our contribution, thank you, our contribution to OPEB. So we do not, and for the town of Groton itself, we do not use free cash to offset the operating budget, and that's a very important fact about the school district when we get to what we're doing for next year with regards to the school district. Local receipts, as we said, supports 11% of the operating budget. Again, it's a very healthy number, but we're being very cautious and conservative as we go forward. But it's still a very large percentage, and it's the largest percentage of all our comparable communities in terms of the offset. The tax levy, of course, supports 73% of our operating budget. And what we did here is we looked at the normal 2.5% increase, and we took a look at new growth, and we felt that every year, based on some of the projections coming from our planning board and the like, that we would be taking in some $15 to $18 million a year in new growth to help support the operating budget. So those are very, very important numbers. So when you look at our revenue projections for the next 5 years, you can see that the anticipated increase is about $7.5 million in growth over the next 5 years, which to me is a very healthy growth and a very robust economy in the town of Groton in terms of growth based on the normal 2.5% increase, new growth, and our estimated receipts. So now we had to look at our expenditure assumptions, and this was the most important part of the study. So looking at the school district, teacher contracts are expiring. We have to assume salary increases based on contracts settled in other districts. Obviously, the school committee is in the process of collective bargaining. We can't get into details right now, but they are carrying a number based on settled contracts of other districts. They're eliminating all dependency on the excess and deficiency fund to support the operating budget. As I said before, the town of Groton does not use the E&D account or our free cash account to fund the operating budget. The school committee for the last several years, in an effort to help the towns of Groton and Dunstable meet their needs or meet their obligations to the school district, have used the E&D fund for recurring expenses in the operating budget. That is not good practice, and that's something that we do not do in the town of Groton. So the school committee has made the decision not to use that at all and to get rid of it, and that's a very important decision, and I applaud that decision. New positions are needed to maintain services, including teachers, counselors, and maintenance employees. They're looking at a 10% increase in health insurance and a 10% increase in utilities, plus $100,000 for irrigation and bottled water until we can figure out a new source of water to the school, which the Groton Town Meeting will be dealing with on Saturday. Municipal expenditure assumptions, 2.5% increase in personnel costs. County retirement is expected to grow at 6.5% a year. Health insurance at 9%. Minimal increase in expenses, and in FY25, it's anticipated that the Neshoba Tech assessment will increase about $250,000. And the reason for that it's an anomaly that happened. Usually, Groton sends between 12 and 14 students a year to Neshoba Tech, and our budget has been pretty consistent. The problem is, 4 years ago, for some reason, the freshman class only had 4 students. Groton benefited that year by seeing a major decrease in its assessment to Neshoba Tech. Unfortunately, those 4 students graduated and 14 students came in. So we're going to see a major increase in our assessment to Neshoba Tech next year. Based on that, we put together the 5-year projection, taking in those expenditure assumptions, taking in the revenues, and you can see over 5 years we're projecting an $11.3 million deficit over 5 years. So even though we have $7.5 million of anticipated new revenues coming in, it's not enough to support the proposed operating budget or the projections. And I will say that our projections are very conservative moving forward. You saw them up on the board. They're not extravagant. There's no growth. There's no additional positions looking for on the municipal side, and the only new positions that they're looking for on the school side is necessary to maintain class sizes moving forward. No new positions. That's a very important part of our assumptions. So to address an anticipated $11 million deficit over 5 years, including a $4 million deficit next year, there are 3 options that the working group looked at. 1, we can reduce the anticipated fiscal year proposed budget by $3.9 million. The second thing we can do is we can look for a 1-year override of $3.9 million to eliminate the projected increase, or we can seek an override of $10.4 million to eliminate the projected 5-year deficit. So those were the 3 things we looked at. Going into a little bit of detail with those, to reduce the anticipated budget by 3.9, the Select Board Finance Committee and the School Committee had agreed in the past to share in any budget deficit by the district absorbing 60% of the deficit and the town absorbing 40%. The reason we do that is because 60% of our budget is schools, 40% of our budget is town. And that has been something that we have talked about in the past, and as a matter of fact, that's what we did last fiscal year to balance last year's budget. So if we did that following through into fiscal year 25, the district would need to reduce its budget by its assessment to the town of Groton by $2.3 million, and the town of Groton would have to reduce its budget by $1.5 million to do that. The reduction required by the school district would actually be more than 2.3 because you have to factor in, if they're going to lower Groton's by 2.3, they would have to lower Dunstable's by that percentage share of the district. So their cut would actually be between $3 and $3.4 million. And I believe, Sherry, you're going to go into a little bit more detail on that when you present. These reductions would continue in subsequent fiscal years based on our revenue projections, and without any new revenues, it would actually be worse every year, that you would have to see a reduction of about $1 million in the town's operating budget if we just did that one-year reduction. It wouldn't just end in fiscal 25. It would continue in future years. So what would happen in the school district? There's two ways to look at school cuts. You can look at non-core classes, which would be no curricular coordination from K through 12, no whole child education, a degradation in the record keeping, no support for discipline, limited social emotional learning supports, no sports, no full-day kindergarten. Option 2, to make that cut, you would have to look at class sizes, which means you would retain music and art, but you wouldn't have a library curriculum. You'd have significant increases in class sizes, K through 12. You'd see a degradation in records and parent interactions with the schools, no support for discipline, no sports, no full-day kindergarten, and no K through 12 curriculum. You would see a real reduction in the overall schools. The municipal budget would also see a very significant reduction in budget. We normally increase our budget about $600,000 a year in operating expenses based on health insurance and pension and things like that. But we would have to cut our budget by $1.5 million to make this work. So it would cause an 11% reduction in the municipal budget because we do have some fixed costs that we have to pay, like the Middlesex County retirement. To do that, we'd eliminate most administrative support in the various departments. Town hall hours would be significantly reduced, meaning limited access by the public. And we talked long and hard about this one. This is not a threat, and it's not trying to scare anybody. It's just a fact of life. Our largest budget is public safety. To make cuts to get to $1.5 million, we would have to eliminate police officers and firefighters and reduce them. We would have a reduced number of those officers and firefighters per shift, which would slow responses and increase times for medical emergencies. And we would also be subject to a significant increase in overtime, or we would get an unfair labor practice because within the police department budget, we have a minimum manning, which means we have to have 2 officers on every shift. And we would have to fill shifts with overtime. And it would be, as I'd like to say, a kabuki dance trying to figure out how to balance those two things. We would also see an elimination of DPW workers, which would lead to a reduction in hours at the transfer station, delaying of maintenance of roads, and of course snow removal operations in the winter would suffer. We'd see a significant reduction in hours of operation at the library and the Council on Aging because those make up the major portion of the culture and recreation. And to absorb an 11% cut, those two would have to take on the brunt of it because the country club makes money. And the last thing we want to do is cut that out. We had a profit of $119,000. That's a major revenue source to the town. We want to maintain the country club. We would also lose $30,000 in direct state aid because the library would no longer meet their minimum appropriation requirement. And then the town would need to consider further reductions or use free cash to cover unemployment expenses. So option 1 is really not a really good option for either the school district or the municipal government. Option 2 is to seek an override of about $4 million. It would provide the needed revenues to eliminate the deficit in 25, and would allow the school district and the municipal operation to maintain services in 25 and then further study potential additional revenue sources in future fiscal years and beyond. It would essentially delay what we're presenting to you tonight by 1 year. Well, this is a short-term fix. As I said, it doesn't solve the problem, and we would still be facing that again. A $4 million override in Groton would add $1.54 to the tax rate based on this year's values and cost the average taxpayer, which is a home value of $633,000, an additional $976 next fiscal year. Option 2, could you go back to the slide? As you can see from option 2, it eliminates the deficit in 25, but it does not shut us down. We still have about a $7 million deficit projected over those next 5 years, and we would have to come up with something in those years to offset that deficit. Option 3 would be to seek an override of $10.4 million. Many municipalities have utilized a multi-year approach to ensure that services are provided and needs are met over a longer period of time. A multi-year override will eliminate the deficit for both the town of Groton and our assessment to the school district over the next 5 years. It does eliminate for the 5 years, but we think it would probably be longer, like 5 to 8 years, depending on increases in state aid and local receipts. It's a very conservative estimate at this time. And most importantly, it avoids presenting override requests to taxpayers multiple times, which really results in budgetary uncertainty and continued fiscal crises. So we really want to eliminate that. And as you can see now, where we had an $11 million deficit over 5 years, that override would put us about $500,000 above the norm within 5 years, which would eliminate all uncertainty and allow us to fund both the town and the potential school district assessment over that time. This chart I put up here shows what the impact is between what a normal increase would be without an override and what the override cost would be. It's about $4,500 or $4,300 over 5 years, and it would cost the average taxpayer an additional $551 a year over an average of 5 years, with the largest increase being in the first year, and then you can see it decreases in subsequent years. So the conclusion of the working group is we believe that we conducted a comprehensive budget analysis. It's probably the most significant budget analysis that we've done in the town of Groton in the 15 years that I've served as your town manager. The working group is absolutely convinced that it's critical to maintain the high quality services that the school district and the municipal operation of the town of Groton provides. These budgets will require community support, and the report created by this working group is intended to guide discussions on the fiscal year 25 budget. So specifically, Monday night, October 30th, by our town charter, the Finance Committee and the Select Board have to get together and provide budget guidance to the town manager to prepare the fiscal year 25 budget. We believe this report will give them the needed tools to make that decision and that recommendation. I know I went really fast, but I know you have a lot to do tonight, so thank you very much for your time.
I don't know if we want to take any questions between presentations, because Sherry, I believe you're up next.
No, Jason's up
Jason,
next.
you're up next. Is there any questions, or shall we move on to the next presentation? Yes, Peter.
Real quickly, a minor point. As far as the comparables go, why weren't other, I guess, regional school districts using comparables?
So we
Or
use,
maybe they were. I just didn't.
we use 10 school districts, as we refer to as our market basket. This was actually voted on by the school committee and approved by the select boards about 7 years ago. We started out with 50 towns. We removed towns that their per pupil expenditure was too many standard deviations from ours. We removed school districts that their enrollment was too far. We moved school districts that were more than 50 miles away. There was a whole criteria. Katie Novak was actually the one that did this because there was a lot of, every time we wanted to compare the school district to somebody, everybody was picking different places. So we wanted to use the same 10 schools. Of those 10 schools, 4 of them have almost within 100 students of us. So while if you look at the Groton by the numbers, which I gave to Mark, which I believe was distributed some time ago, that has a comparison to all 10 school districts, but 4 of those have enrollments that are almost exactly the same as ours. So there are some that have a little bit smaller, there are some that are a little bit larger. So we're actually comparing ourselves against 10 school districts. Why don't we use regional school districts? Because some of them are much larger, some of them have larger per pupil expenditures, some of them have a great many higher numbers of students that are on free and reduced lunch or ELL, and we need to compare apples to apples as much as possible. But there are several school districts in there that are regional school districts, one of which is Acton-Boxborough.
I just identified 4 that met the enrollment.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, Jason?
Thanks.
It's going to take me a minute. I got to
Okay.
switch.
All right. So while you're doing that, I don't think I know everybody here. So I'm Jason Silver. I'm the new town administrator that Mark was talking about in his slide presentation.
So we have a PDF, so that's, you're just going to have to tell me when you want to go on to the next slide, okay?
Okay, yeah. You go ahead.
All right. There we
So
go.
this is just a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about. First, you can keep moving. The first slide is, first section is going to be about FY24, just because I think this fiscal year's budget kind of provide some context on where the town is financially. So this fiscal year, last budget cycle, we asked for a 301.
Jason, could you get real close to the microphone? Otherwise, the guys up back have to adjust it. We get a lot of feedback, and the people at home can't hear you. So I don't know if you
Okay.
can move that up a little bit.
Either
You have
that
to
or
be
you can
about
move over here
this
if you
close.
don't want to do
I'm
that.
short, and this is low. Can I?
Sorry,
raise
just
this
want to make
one?
sure
No,
everyone
it's
can
all
hear
right.
this.
No.
Thank you.
Yep. Is that better?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
I feel like Bob Barker. All right. So in FY24, we asked for a $301,000 override. It passed town meeting. It failed, unfortunately failed at the ballot. So the failure of that override resulted in a variety of reductions in municipal departments. And as it says up there, we did fully fund the district's assessment. Next slide. So here are some of the, it's a little cut off, but here are some of the, there we go, thank you. Here are some of the impacts that our municipal budget experienced. So $85,000 in police roughly was cut. The major impact of that reduction was one police officer position on the overnight shift. So now in Dunstable, there's only one police officer overnight. Fire department experienced almost a $53,000 reduction. Again, the major impact of that reduction was going down from 2 per diem firefighters during the day to 1 per diem firefighter during the day. Fortunately, we had a private donor step up and actually fund that second position. So for this fiscal year, it's a Band-Aid, don't get me wrong. But for this fiscal year, we are able to fund that at staff the fire station at 2. Highway, now this was a new employee. We have, we currently have three highway employees plus the superintendent. We were trying to add an additional employee so that we could have 2 crews of 2. Unfortunately, that failed. And then a variety of cuts for park selectmen and treasure collector. So in addition to those reductions in FY24 for this fiscal budget, we also had to increase our free cash support to our operating budget by $95,000 to $574,343. Now, unfortunately, we are in a very similar position as the school department using E&D. We're using free cash to plug our operational hole each year. And as you see, I think on the next slide, no, not the next slide, but an upcoming slide, how that's growing over time. You can go to the next one. So these are just generally the impacts that the town school side saw. We, on the town side, saw a reduction of almost $160,000 overall in our town budget, operations and debt service, schools, the regional school district, Groton Dunstable Regional School District saw an increase of $471. Next slide. So I do want to preface some of these, some of this information here. This is a snapshot in time. So these are based on projections and assumptions. They are not definitive numbers. We are in the middle of our budget process. So one thing I will guarantee, these numbers are going to change. I think these are very close to being our numbers, but they're not the final numbers. So we are still a little behind the town of Groton. We have tried to start our budget process earlier to better align our budget with the town of Groton in the school district. So we're working hard at that, and hopefully over time we'll get better and better and better. But I just do want to preface some of these slides as these are, it's a snapshot in time. I know already that some of these numbers are going to change, but it does give us a rough idea of the financial condition of the town. So I'm not going to go through all this, but in general, what our forecast assumes is a 2% increase in salaries, 1% increase in general expenses, 2.5% contract services, and 2% in utilities. Next slide. So this gives you an overview of our revenues. The real point of this is we're in probably like every community in the Commonwealth, we heavily rely on our tax levy on real estate taxes to balance our budget. And outside of that, we do not have as a diverse revenue stream as the town of Groton or many other communities. We're a small community, we're a rural community. So our other revenue streams available outside of the tax levy is very limited. You can see up there, our free cash use, which is a bad practice, is more than the state aid we receive annually. So that gives you generally an idea of revenue streams outside of our tax levy. It's very minimal. So this is a really important slide because this demonstrates one of the fundamental problems within our budget. And I think it's similar to the school department. So we have seen from 19 to 24 a dramatic increase in free cash used to balance our budget. Why is that? It's simple. Our revenues are not keeping up with our increased expenses. So our revenues are here, expenses here, and the gap just keeps getting larger and larger to fill. So we've been filling it with free cash to try to maintain level services. We're not increasing services. It's just to maintain level services. From 19 to 24, our free cash use has increased by $440,000, 330%. It's a wild number. So we have to stabilize that because the growth is not sustainable. And I don't want to keep repeating this, but I think the schools are experiencing a similar scenario. So in the FY25 forecast, we have reduced the reliance on free cash by $50,000. So we're not pulling it all out at once because we just can't afford to do that. So rather than pulling it out all at once, we're trying to be thoughtful about it and step off it over time, gradually step off it, so that we can, reduce the reliance, but not pull out all the free cash at once to create a real hole, a larger hole than we already have. Go back. Can you just go back one more time?
Okay,
yeah, sorry. So, I think the balance remaining is an important number too. So after our appropriation, the balance we have remaining in free cash is $66,000. That's that's not enough. It's not sufficient. So that's a real problem as well. And we have $300,000 in our stabilization fund. So our rainy day monies, our reserve funds, it is not a good situation right now. So we have to work, in addition to funding our budget, we have to work to increase our balances in our reserve funds. Next slide, thank you. So this is just a breakdown of our forecasted revenue. We only see $110,000 in new growth generally. $750 in local receipts, that's level. And that's frankly a little slightly too aggressive than I'd like to be, but that's where we're at. A 4% increase, that's just a rolling average over the last 5 years. And then the $50,000 reduction in free cash. So I've tried to describe, I guess, what I see as available new revenues for FY25. So we're projecting $402,000 of total new revenue for 25. With the reduction in free cash, that drops it by 50. We're also adding back capital expenditures. We were fortunate this year to have some ARPA funding that we were able to utilize to fund our capital improvements for this year. But ARPA funds aren't forever either, unfortunately. I wish they were, but they're not. So we have to add back, and that 119 is again just a rolling average of what we've spent. So the revenues have to be reduced again by 119, so that gets you to $232,000 of available new revenue for FY25. So then what I've done at the bottom of this slide is just proportion it out based on our overall spending. So 62% is the regional school district, 38% is the town. That's the number. $144,000 or 1.8 increase for the schools, and 38% to the town, 88.5, almost a 2% for the town side. Next slide. This is just a breakdown of percentages for our overall expenditures. 66% of the schools. The next highest is public safety, not to anyone's surprise. Go ahead. Thanks. So based on our assumptions, this will change, but based on our assumptions, these are the deficits for each fiscal for the next 4 years. This, in FY25, it's a little over $1 million. So this kind of breaks out the deficits for the town and the school district. So the town's operating costs, based on our forecast, is anticipated to increase about $178,000. Total new revenue, available revenue, $88,000. So the projected deficit on the town side is about a little under $90,000. For the regional school district, you see the projected deficit for the regional school district is about $977,000. I created this slide just so we could understand, I don't know how to say it other than ability to pay, based on our single-family tax bill, our average single-family tax bill. So we're substantially higher than the average single-family tax bill statewide. So I just wanted people to have some, when we're asking for more money from the community, have some context of what they're already paying. So we also went through a very similar process as the town managers group, what is it called? Tri-committee? TRICOM, with comparable communities. And these are some of the factors we use to compare. It's funny, Dunstable is not an easy community to find comps for. So we did our best here, but so this is the grouping we came up with. Essex, Merrimack, Princeton, West Newbury, Hubbardston, Brimfield, Nahant, Sheffield. So the first slide is organized based on single-family tax bill. So we're third highest when compared to the comparable communities. Total assessed value is we're on the bottom half, but on the upper bottom half of assessed value. Next slide. Total spending, we're smack dab in the middle. So that tells me we did a decent job with choosing some of these communities, but we're right in the middle when looking at total spending. And this is all based on FY22 numbers. Those are the numbers that DLS has available. So again, spending categories similar to Groton. We looked at all the spending categories. I did not highlight all of these because in the town of Dunstable, there are several of these that are just so inconsequential that they're not even worth mentioning. So the ones that are important are on the next slides, just so you get an understanding of how we compare. So for fire, public works, general government, you'll see general government we spend the least, and that's percentage of overall spend. It's not the actual number. But for general government we spend the least, public works we spend second to last, and fire we're at the bottom half. Human services were second to last. Now the next slides are areas where we actually invest competitively with our pool of comparable communities. So culture and rec, that is also driven in Dunstable by our public library. The police department, we're second highest, and in education, we're second highest. And I will say, just from a perspective of, hey, we are a community that has very limited resources. How would you want to spend those limited resources? Those three areas are not the worst areas where you'd want to invest in. So it does make some sense that those areas have been the focus of the community to make sure we're investing properly in. So this is a revenue outlook based on our comparable communities. You'll see that Dunstable relies on its tax levy as a percentage of its overall revenue the most by a fair amount. So again, it just reiterates the fact that the tax levy is the major contributor to our overall revenue, and any other alternative revenues are very, very minimal. Okay, so this is trying to give you all some understanding of the magnitude based on our overall spend on the town side. So this 1.06 deficit, so if you add up all our highway budget, all our fire budget, and all our library budget, that's essentially the deficit we're looking at for FY25. All of those added up. And actually, the increase of the schools is more than all of those departments added up. And this is just another way just to understand the magnitude. On the town side, all of our expenses all in are $1.37 million. The deficit is about 1.1. It equals to about 23% of our total town operational budget. So if we are to absorb, if we were to have to absorb this without some additional revenues, we'd be cutting a quarter of our town side budget. All right. So like I said, we're early in the process. We've started the FY25 budget. We have also put together a group between the town and the schools to work on the FY25 budget. We've only had 2 meetings, so like I said, we're a little behind Groton. We have a financial forecast and a CIP drafted. Our budget worksheets from departments were due a couple weeks ago. I'm going through departmental meetings now. We asked departments for 2 budgets, a level service and a level funded. And like I said, we're continuing to go through department budgets. And following that, I anticipate very soon we'll convene meetings with the select board and advisory to start picking away at this thing. So that's my, I feel like I didn't even take a breath, but that's my presentation. I'm happy to take questions or wait till the end too. Thanks.
Is there any questions for Jason? Okay. Jerry, you're up.
All right. I promise mine, couldn't hear. Is that loud enough? No. Do you want me to stand up? Oh, wait, that's better. Okay. So this presentation is smaller because it's just taking the 2 that you've already seen and putting them together. And a lot of the data we've already preliminarily given the school committee, and it is on the website under the FY25 budget if you wanted to reference it. So again, just reiterating what both town administrators had said, that we had gone through, we shared our assumptions for feedback on whether or not they seemed to be reasonable, and also shared our rankings for where we were for salaries, for student outcomes. Again, that is all in a 96-slide presentation called Groton by the Numbers, and that is in the FY25 budget folder. I'm going to say this many times this year because I find that this is a place that I explain a lot to people, that there's a difference between the amount of the assessment goes up by the towns. Assessment is a revenue source, whereas the percentage that our budget goes up reflects our expenditures. So, for instance, this year's budget versus the budget that we put together as an estimate in the summer is up by $4.3 million, or a 9.13% increase. And we're in the same spot as Jason. You know, our numbers will change. We're gathering the information now, and we'll have better numbers in a couple weeks. The assessment increases, there's 2 things that can make your assessment go up. One is other revenue sources go down or are eliminated, or our expenses increase. Both conditions are happening in the FY23 budget.
Oh, I went the wrong way, sorry.
Just a visual of looking at what the assessments are for both towns this current year versus what we estimate for next year. And as you can see, it's a 14.49% increase for Dunstable and a 16.12% increase in assessment to Groton. And when you add those 2 increases in assessments, that is $5.3 million. Remember, I said our expenses are up by 4.3 million. Looking at what it would look like of the assessments versus available funding, for Groton, when they applied the formula that they have for available funds, we would end up with a $2.3 million deficit in Groton, and I believe that matches the number that you had. And Mark wanted me to make sure to say that with their formula, that does reduce town services. It's not that there's just extra money that they're giving the town that would come at the decimation of other parts of the town budget. Dunstable, again, you can see the estimated assessment versus what this year's is. If they had the 144, which I believe matches the number that you had, we would have a projected shortfall of just under $1 million from Dunstable. And just go back one second. Just to reiterate again too, if 144 ends up being the most that Dunstable can provide, then that means that only the proportional share of an increase could be raised in Groton, which is it's less than $500,000. So that would just make that deficit bigger. Again, wanted to point out this isn't a one-year problem that we've projected. It's going to be a multi-year with the funding gap in the out years, not in 25, but in 26 and beyond, of $1 million roughly for Groton, and between 535 and 633 in Dunstable. And one thing, as we've been starting to get the word out about that there is a deficit, we've heard many times that the school district always says this, and you find the money. So I just wanted to reiterate how we found the money last year, which wasn't finding money in all places, it was making cuts. So the school committee used more revenue from E&D, so we were up to $911,000 in E&D usage last year for operating expenses. The town of Groton added $400,000 more than they had originally anticipated to close the gap. Our health insurance renewed at a lower rate than we anticipated. We reduced an assistant principal at the high school. We reduced a guidance position at the high school. We reduced a wellness teacher at the high school, an ELA teacher at the high school. The vacancy wasn't filled. The technology library FTE at Swallow Union. And then we moved $120,000 of paraprofessional salaries to grant funding, and we moved $150,000 of out-of-district tuitions to our circuit breaker funding. So that wasn't really finding money, that was reductions in using other revenue sources that could be considered one time. The budget challenges that we've been facing include the utilities inflationary, negotiation outcomes that we're anticipating, that we're not using $911,000 in E&D. The towns are not going to use free cash or as much free cash to balance their budgets. And our health insurance has been swinging between 5.9 and 19.9% in the renewals.
Can I just interject for 1 second, Sherry, and thank you for doing such a great job with this, is that the E&D usage is particularly concerning because of the inability to respond to out-of-district placements. So the $911,000 that we used last year, we were extraordinarily lucky that we did not get a student that came into the district that had pretty significant needs, because I know it seems hard to believe, but that $911,000 for tuition in a residential placement or a day placement that required transportation into, Perkins School for the Blind or something like that could easily fall into that amount of money. So not having that E&D makes us very vulnerable to out-of-district placements, which, by the way, last year went up 14.9%, and this next year is projected to go up an additional 4.6%. We have no control over that. That's set by the state. Thank you.
This is my last slide, and this is just to let you know that all of the documents that we have referenced will be in the budget folder, and the way that this is the path that you can find it from the website. Go to the Business and Finance Department, then you'll see a link for the folder. It'll have a listed 2025 budget folder, and then the Groton by the numbers is in there, and all of our budget assumptions are in there, including what the assessment calculations are, and then these presentations will be in there as well after tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I should have said at the end of my presentation, because I went really fast, that the main report, there's a huge report that generated the PowerPoint presentation. That'll be posted on the town's website tomorrow for anybody that wants to go in depth to the numbers that I presented. That report, yep.
All right, we completed the presentations, which is a summary of the work that all of us have been doing over the summer to try to provide the most comprehensive look at where our budget lies now and provide the public with their first glimpse of the obstacles and difficulties that we're facing going into this year. I don't know if our committees and boards have any questions or follow-ups that they would like to ask. And if not, or if there's any comments from the public that would like to be asked. If not, there's a lot, just go ahead, Jake.
So I appreciate all the time that everyone spent in doing this. My name is Jake Lewan. I'm the chairman of the advisory board within Dunstable. So just going through the report and understanding everything that we do have, information we have available to us, and I appreciate everyone working with us here as we try to understand all the numbers here. The biggest thing that I find concerning as I look through the numbers here is that comparing ourselves to Westwood, Bedford, North Reading, and Linfield just doesn't appear to be appropriate. And I say it doesn't appear to be appropriate because of the district wealth. If you look at the differences between our numbers and the other districts that we're comparing ourselves to, it seems to be just way out of whack. And they're using that number to then compare the salaries that we pay in our community versus those communities. So you look at Westwood, which has 137% of the average district, or the average wealth. Dunstable and Groton are at 92%. I don't understand how we could compare our salaries that we pay versus a community that obviously is 45% more wealthy than we are. And when that's compared by the state, that's not just us, right? So
That's the chart you're talking about, right?
Correct. Oh, very similarly, yes. It's truncated down within the report, but understandable. Yes, it's very close. And looking at the total enrollment, we fall at the bottom of that list of community wealth there, and it's concerning with how we're able to continue to spend at the rate that we are, which everyone has sat up here instead, that Groton, Dunstable, as well as the school district, feels that the spending that we are performing at this point has gone above and beyond what is reasonable and has depleted the funds that come from free cash or E&D to the point where we can't continue to do that. And now we have such significant increases that both member communities now have to present their bases, their communities, with significant overrides just to be able to fund this. Understanding that we've put together sort of a doomsday scenario if we're not able to fund these things, but at some point in time we have to look for ways to curb spending instead of looking to just continually increase this amount of spending year after year. And looking at those numbers and looking at what even the Mark's presentation showed, the Grotons across there, you're looking at their assessed amount, and the 11 million, it was almost 9 million of that just came directly from the school. So it doesn't seem to add up to how we're doing it. And I don't disagree that inflation has increased and it has gone up, and we do need to sort of balance out the only the 2.5% that we're able to assess our community. But at some point in time, these numbers just don't work. And we need to figure out a way that makes it work, not just explaining to both towns that this is how much it costs, so find a way to pay for it. I understand we've worked together and we've gotten to points within All of our budgetary negotiations, we found ways to do it mostly through free cash and E&D to be able to get to that point. But now both of our communities here are depleted to the point that we cannot continue to use it. So where do we go from here? And I can tell you right now that in my mind, Groton actually passing that 5-year override is almost the death nail for Dunstable, because there's no way we can keep up with that spending at that point. No, there's almost zero. And even if we went for a similar override, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be passed, and we're not going to be able to keep up with the rate of spending that is being proposed.
So I think the hard part about having these conversations is, as much as we don't like what has been presented to us, there's been, as you can look around this room, a lot of people have been engaged in the conversation to ensure that we are analyzing, presenting the appropriate amount, type of data, having discussions around that data, and providing the community with a snapshot of the reality of where we think we are. We knew this time was coming. We put it off for a really long time. Last year was a really tough budget cycle, and the amount of free cash and E&D that we used to offset it. We've been doing it for a lot of years. The writing has been on the wall. Now, we've had a couple of things that have complicated that along the way, and regardless of whether you feel as though Westwood is an appropriate marker, we have 10 other districts that have been studied and analyzed, and nobody is ever going to be an exact replica of our district so that we can compare it. But for the most part, with all the data points that we've looked at relative to these are pretty comparable to what we're doing, with some outliers always in one direction or the other, one item or the other. But the truth of it is if you want to provide an education to your kids that is what we provide in Groton Dunstable, which is valued by this community, which is valued by the school committee, then it comes at a cost. Otherwise, we don't provide that education, and we choose to provide something that is below and subpar to what we have grown to expect in this community. And you have to pay for it. And I know Dunstable has a lot of things that they have to think about. Your picture in your community is very different. But it comes down, particularly at the school board, with we are charged on the school committee to ensure that our kids are properly educated, that we meet all the bars legally by DESE that we are supposed to, that we try to do our best with the dollar that it's given, and we've done well to use the dollars that we have given to create academic success above and beyond the monies that we've given. We do better than other districts in that regard. So unless, and as I say, I appreciate that, but and what you say about Dunstable, but basically what you're telling me is we have to figure out a way to make this work, and I agree. But if that comes at the cost of education for our kids, that's a non-starter, because unless you want to not educate our kids to the level that we do now, then we have no other choice.
Faye, I have some comments I'd like to make as well. You guys could be, if you want to keep going, fine.
That's okay.
Okay, if that's all right. I put together some prepared remarks so that I could respect everyone's time and express my opinion efficiently, so bear with me here for just a couple of minutes. First, I just want to say thank you to the peer board members that worked over the summer, the school administration, and the town managers. They've really just given a masterclass on how to organize and present the information to the public, so thank you very much for that. I'm optimistic for the two communities in the district based on the amount of collaboration to date. The main good news right now is that we were able to work together to understand the problem and distill it down to a level everyone can understand. I've personally been looking at this since July, so I feel I have a good understanding of it, but I can certainly appreciate that the board members that were not involved and the public need more time to review it and ask some questions. I'd like to touch on three things. First, I'm sure a natural reaction is that people are going to be upset and they're looking for someone to blame here. I don't feel that this is the fault of anyone at this table or the peer boards. That would be the case if there was a spending or a management problem. That's not the problem. This is a revenue problem. The person to blame is the representatives and senators in the State House. And I want to be very clear, I don't specifically mean our representatives. They've been very helpful and cooperative with us on a number of issues. I mean the body as a whole. There are a lot of moving parts in the town and school budgets. The biggest driver of this situation is the fact that our Chapter 70 money is being held flat by the state due to the legislation that determines how much we receive. This is what's causing us to be in a situation where we have to raise taxes dramatically or reduce services. We definitely should try to get the legislators to change this, but we can't stop or slow down the FY25 budget process. We have to move forward. Second, how we move forward. I really want to hear from the other board members to see how they feel we should move forward. Maybe not tonight, but in the near future. I also need to hear from the public on what they want once we have a chance to digest all of this and they can have their questions answered. My personal inclination at this time is to maintain both the school as well as the municipal services at the current level, since I feel they're of equal importance. I've heard how devastating this would be to either side, and I don't want to see us go down into a downward spiral as a district or as two communities. That's not the town I want to live in. It's not the